Up to every point in human history, burying corpses has become an indispensable part of the perception of life and death. However, asking the question, when did people know how to bury bodies, is a big challenge for researchers. This raises a series of issues, including determining the exact cause and meaning behind this act, as well as the evolution of human consciousness about death and related rituals. Archaeological findings have provided valuable information about this. Although there is no specific data on the earliest date, research and archaeology suggest that the practice of burying corpses may have begun thousands of years before the emergence of early civilizations. Archaeological sites from prehistoric times, such as ancient royal tombs in Egypt or Neolithic burial sites in Europe and the Middle East, show a clear burial pattern. Corpses and the rituals associated with burial. Although each region has its own customs and beliefs, the custom of burying corpses evokes a deep awareness of death and belief in life after death in human culture. This represents progress in thought and religion, as well as the ability to build and maintain complex civilizations and social relationships. Thus, although it is impossible to accurately determine the first date, the burial of corpses has become an inseparable part of the process of civilization and human consciousness, marking the development of an aspect of human consciousness. Each person may start from a different point in life, but our ultimate goal is the same: death. Despite human efforts throughout history, death remains an inevitable reality. When a person passes away, their last contact with the world usually takes place at the funeral. Although many people believe that these habits only appear in modern times, the latest discoveries from archaeologists have proven that the physical laws of death have been discovered by humans since ancient times. The question of the history and meaning of these rituals remains an interesting matter of research and discussion. According to anthropologist Andrei Gagavest, who works at the Center for the Evolutionary Origins of Human Behavior at Kyoto University, there is a clear difference between burials and graves. To illustrate, if a chimpanzee sits and observes, the physical interaction between members of the species is called indirect. In contrast, the act of burial involves the intentional social behaviors of animals with complex thinking, in which the individual understands that he or she is a separate entity in the natural world and recognizes the importance of the existence of the deceased individual. People are always concerned about the disposal of the deceased body, so this concern plays an important role in daily life. According to anthropologist Sigalatas at Dreamy Trees, University of Connecticut, although the custom of burying the deceased is very common and does not seem to bring direct benefits, its importance is shown through the role of it for the survivors. Funerals allow loved ones to grieve and find comfort, as well as face the reality of death and find the strength to move on. For people, death becomes a part of culture and religion, carrying a deep and special meaning in the process of overcoming pain and loss. According to scientist Rory Sminoff of the Stone Age Department of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, the behavior of early prehistoric humans was often limited to activities that did not directly benefit them. These activities are often related to human evolution, such as hunting, gathering food, making tools, and moving on two legs to meet personal needs. Therefore, the performance of burial rituals marks a new stage of development of human society. Humans evolved from the human genus, also known as the genus Homo, with many subspecies having disappeared, including Neanderthals and many other apes. However, Homo sapiens is the only species of the genus Homo that still exists today, and it is classified as modern humans. The Homo sapiens group also has similar cultural and lifestyle characteristics to us. In 1960, Rab archaeologist Saliki discovered the remains of a Neanderthal in Iraq. Believed to have died in his 40s, this bone, known as the foreskin shanny, was found at a depth of 7 5 meters below ground and covered by a layer of soil. The structure is looser than the surrounding soil layers. Pollen fragments were also found there. According to analysis by RAP archaeologist Salicki, the Shani Da skeleton dates from 65.5 to 35.5 years ago and appears to show signs of a deliberate burial. French paleontologist Leroy Guhan suggested that this pollen sample originated from Maverchia, a large, single, pointed flower. This suggests the possibility that Neanderthals of that period lived in caves and collected flowers for burial, an action similar to humans today. According to Salicki, finding these flower graves shows that Neanderthals had an awareness of beauty. This is a sign of Neanderthal cognitive development, according to archaeologist Ruf Salicki. However, this idea was quickly rejected by pollen scientist Adlet Leroy Guhan in 1975. He published information about soil samples taken from Sunita Cave and said pollen was blown into the cave by the wind. Several other specimens found in the cave contained pollen from at least 8 species of small, brightly colored flowers related to holly. However, the attractiveness of these features may also be caused by rats, so there remains some doubt about pollen deposition near the dew burrow. Later studies focused on the similarities between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Therefore, the last event is not recognized as the origin of burial customs because there is not enough evidence that Neanderthals understood the relationship between the deceased and the meaning of burial. Despite this, more evidence from around the world continues to be found on this issue. After the process of narrowing the scope and eliminating some unnatural elements, there are 3 ancient burial cases that are believed to have a scientific basis corresponding to the progress of human development. This is a hot topic of discussion in the archaeological community. The first case is called Mtoto, which means child in Swahili. In 2017, a team of archaeologists, led by the National Museum and the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History, discovered a 3-meter deep pit containing many bone fossils. These fossils are believed to be that of a child between 2 and 3 years old. The difference in environmental temperature and time caused these skeletons to be in a state of decomposition. Just touching or moving them a little is enough to turn them into dust. To protect the fossil, the archaeological team decided to remove all the soil from the hole, then protected it with plaster. They then moved it to the National Museum of Kenya in Nairobi, and then into a specialized laboratory at the National Center for Research on Human Evolution in Spain. In the laboratory, researchers carefully analyzed these bones. The discovery, published in the journal Nature, said scientists discovered most of the baby's skull and face, along with the upper teeth still growing in the lower jaw. Based on these signs, this set of remains was identified as belonging to the Homo sapiens group, dating to about 78,000 BC. Mtoto's bones have almost the same connection points as when alive, and the spine and curvature of the rib cage are still intact. This provides important information which, when combined with other aspects of the condition of the skeleton, suggests that the child may have been buried shortly after death. The body was then quickly covered with soil and decomposed in the grave. The whole sediment mix had a different color and texture than the surrounding sediment, implying that it had been dug up and backfilled. Extensive forensic microscopic analysis of the remains and grave suggests the child may have been wrapped in a leaf or animal skin and placed in the mother's uterus. There were even signs that the child had been placed on a pillow. The meticulousness and care in the process of burying this child shows that this is not just a matter of disposing of the body, but also has a profound meaning. Archaeologist Paul Petty from Durham University has commented that there is evidence that the child received attention from one or more people after his death. However, Lyot Chamfrey, another archaeologist at the Human Evolution Research Center at the London Natural History Museum, opposes this. We don't know whether the burial was just the act of a grieving parent or an event organized with the participation of the larger community. Through detailed study of the bones, Mtoto is considered a human burial fossil, representing the oldest known burial custom in Africa, although not the oldest on record. The second case was discovered in South Africa. In 2013, the remains of Homo naledi, a previously unknown species of prehistoric human, were found in a cave system. Their main characteristics were short arms and brains 1/3 the size of modern humans, dating back to about 250,000 to 500,000 years ago. Soon after, literature and anthropologist at Witwatersrand University, South Africa, led a group of scientists to explore many underground caves. They found 27 individuals of the same species, dating from about 330,000 to 241,000 BC, a period when modern humans were just beginning to appear in Africa. According to Badger, Homo naledi had some human-like characteristics, such as the ability to walk upright and manipulate objects with their hands. However, members of this species have smaller heads, shorter and leaner statures, and seemingly more robust bodies. According to Dr. John Hawkes, an anthropologist and paleoanthropologist at Witwatersrand Medical College, researchers discovered the naledi population when they went deep into the cave. This shows that this human species clearly used many parts of this cave system. When Badger and colleagues published their initial findings in the journal eLife in 2015, they hypothesized that Homo naledi may have been buried intentionally. This study shows that the naledi community may have moved the body of the deceased there and left it there intentionally. Oval depressions were dug under the surface of the cave, like pits, and the body was placed there in a spinning position. According to the New York Times, some of the bones were oval-shaped and dug into a layer of mud but had nothing inside, clearly not simply falling into a layer of solid material. However, Orodvo, an anthropologist from the French National Scientific Research Center, has proposed that the finds could have been formed by rain or mud. In response to this objection, Bursar said that other circular levels were dug horizontally into terraces, with the body placed inside until the fossil was inaccessible. Bursar believes that it was not simply a body falling into a deep pit, but that the entire body was covered in dust and then decomposed into an entity made up of bones and flesh, not just because the ruins collapsed or be swept away by flood waters. After a 2007 field trip, researchers also discovered another strong connection. They found abstract shapes and patterns carved into cave walls, near places believed to be sacred. The surface has been smoothed, removing some marks and etch marks. Before that, there were other carved traces of similar shapes, recorded by Homo sapiens from about 80,000 years ago and Neanderthals from about 60,000 years ago, as a way of communicating and sharing information. However, due to the nature of the walls made of limestone and dolomite in the cave, determining the age becomes extremely difficult. The study's authors also admit that it will be difficult to determine whether other tracks from the same time are evidence of Homo naledi. However, experts such as Pupetite, professor of Paleolithic archaeology at Durham University and expert on human funeral practices, still disagree with this evidence. I believe the research team is just trying to prove this was an intentional burial and not providing any further evidence, he said. Agreeing with this view, anthropologist Chris Stringer also noted, if this species is adapted to living in caves, then we need more evidence of that in many other locations in South Africa. In the end, the event ended without clear results. The oldest and most famous burial custom belongs to the third case, discovered in Kwezef Cave as real, about 100,000 BC, during excavations from 1930 to 1960. The remains of a total of 15 Homo sapiens were found, including 7 adults and 8 children. In addition, there are other items found here such as flint, seashells, deer horns, and red clay. Two archaeologists Bernhard the Misch and Overf of Joseph spoke in a study, noting that a total of 2 skeletons were found, anatomically well preserved, and the location required human intervention. This suggests that the bodies were protected from predators, even if only minimally. If not, it can be determined whether bone fragments are scattered or not. Of the 15 skeletons, 6 were placed in a space of uniform width, apparently corresponding to the edges of a pit that had been sifted through the separation of rock and manganese. They discovered 2 bodies, 1 adult and 1 child, buried at the same time. The child's left humerus is placed next to the adult's right leg, just a few centimeters apart and slightly higher. All these details provide clear evidence that this was an intentional burial. The difference in age of the skeletons in the cave shows that the funeral customs of the residents here have existed for a long time. This proves that this is a conscious, cultural activity of residents in the area, not simply an impromptu activity at a certain time. Archaeologists, led by Daniel Bargier, an archaeologist at Israel's Tel Aviv University, discovered shells in the cave that were unusually perforated. It is likely that people from the land now known as Israel collected seashells and processed them into pieces of string to wear as jewelry on corpses. Among the seashells found, 5 were covered with red soil. After analysis, this layer of soil was found to be the same type as the coating found on many skeletons in the catacombs. Bargier Sapphire Archaeological Anomaly explained on CNN. Odor is a red colorant for many different materials and was used by prehistoric people. Can be used to paint their bodies, to treat hides, and many other purposes. Obviously, making the seashell red has symbolic meaning. This shows that Homo sapiens was capable of abstract thinking as early as 92,000 BC. Later archaeological excavations have found that, during that period, there was a significant increase in the use of red ochre and more elaborate symbols in Paleolithic culture. This form takes place in parallel with the development of new social networks. This means that as humans evolved, they migrated less and adapted to a more fixed lifestyle. They began to build communities, grow crops, harvest food, and deify animals. This sedentary lifestyle is reflected in other aspects of burial customs, such as storing the dead close to home for ease of visitation and remembrance. On the other hand, this timeline is also consistent with the development of human society because it shows consistency and multidimensional thinking in the human mind, moving from a simple method about 100,000 years ago AD to more elaborate burial rituals around 25,000 BC. This process eventually led to the famous burial customs of the Greeks and Egyptians. After much debate and research, most archaeologists agree that it is difficult to specifically determine the origin of burial customs due to limited access to history. However, based on the legacy left behind, it is clear that early cave burials were intentional. The stairs all have a process. The remaining parts are placed in a neat position with surrounding items. According to archaeologist Maria Morio Torres, when we begin to see actions of caring for the dead that go beyond the time and resource investment required for practical reasons, that is when we begin to see symbolic thinking. By a cultural expert at National Geographic Explorer commented, "We now know that Homo naledi, in addition to Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and a few other species, had behavioral patterns that we considered unique even just a few decades ago." Thank you all for accompanying us. Our program will pause here. Hello and see you again in the next videos.